Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started here just in a couple of minutes as we notice most of our guests have come through the front door. So please make sure you get yourself something to drink and something to eat and find your way to a chair. We'll get started here shortly. Thank you. Test, test. Check. Check, check. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Check, check. How are we sounding?
That's my game. What are you doing? Exactly. You're walking to the lion's den here, man. What are you thinking? Stupid. Think, Mark.
Picking a fight with the media.
Right.
That's awesome. All right, we're just about to get started. If everybody could find their way to a chair or bring your voices down to whisper. I don't know, how's that music playing with your audio? It's nice. It is kind of nice. Keep bringing that down. All right. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Richard with the Downtown Spokane Partnership. Welcome. I want to thank each and every one of you for making the choice to be here tonight. That is a great commitment on your part, and we're very grateful for that. This meeting tonight, as you can tell, is really intended to be casual. It's meant to be informative and hopefully bring us along a path of discovery as we hear from a really fantastic panel from experts about the issues that we're facing today. Our goal today is hopefully to allow you to walk away with a little bit more information than you came in with, to help us all perhaps dispel some myths. There are a lot of questions and folklore about the challenges surrounding homelessness. I'd like to make sure our panelists touch on some of those items so that we can really focus on some of the challenges at hand. Our goal is also hopefully that the panelists will, in the conversation, unveil and discover some potential opportunities for collaboration, identifying gaps where services are needed, where problems exist, and help us to point the needle in the right direction in terms of identifying some possible next steps. To do that, like I said, we've assembled an incredible panel that our moderator will introduce here in just a minute. I also want to mention this is our first of a new series of meetings that the Downtown Spokane Partnership will be convening called the Downtown Dialogues. That hasn't been done in several years, and our format tonight is a little bit different, quite potentially, because of the topic that we're dealing with, both in terms of the challenges around homelessness as well as the unintended kind of byproducts of homelessness that include addiction and nuisance and criminal behavior. Needless to say, the folks that I talk with, these topics are near and dear to all of our hearts. We are passionate, we are emotionally charged about them, and they are complex. And so, as such, what we've done is we've asked that we essentially channel your questions tonight through the question box, and we'll, of course, encourage you to fill out your index cards and fill those in and then submit those, and then Sean will take those questions as they come. I also want to pledge to you personally, we won't be able to get to all of your questions tonight, but it is my personal commitment that within the next 30 days we'll work with not only the experts that you'll hear from tonight, but other experts on the industry to be able to bring forth and to post the answers to each and every one of your questions on our website at downtownspokane.net. So if you don't get your question answered tonight, just know that it will be answered, and we'll be striving to make sure that you get the answer you deserve. Perhaps there's no more important topic than this topic here tonight and today. And like I said, we're extremely grateful for you being here. We're grateful for our media coverage and our partnership with Q6. We're equally grateful for our panelists who have spent their careers and a certain little bit of time preparing for this panel discussion, but their careers dedicated to our community. We'd also like to thank Melissa and Kim as our hosts and for them providing the McGinnity room. So if we could please give all of those folks a warm hand. I'm sure all of us are grateful for the incredible work that our stakeholders provide, our city council, and our mayor dedicate to these issues and to these challenges. And again, we're going to get into some of that tonight to really understand. I hear, well, nothing is happening regarding homelessness. I think you're going to find out that's quite different. There's such an immense amount of work being done and heart and soul being put to that, and that includes your elected officials. We are incredibly, as an organization, we train our team. We operate and treat others as we would like to be treated. We operate and start from a point of respect, and that's how we are asking for us to engage this evening. Again, our goal is to channel our questions through cards so that we don't engage and devolve the conversation, because it is a challenging conversation, and that we really address the individual. The human being on the street is really where we should all start. I think if we start with focusing on that person and their unique set of circumstances that brought them to the place that they are today, then and only then can we really find the solutions that will present themselves, and then and only then will we be able to find and bring together the coalitions that are able to solve those complex challenges. So with that, I'd like now to introduce our moderator, Mr. Sean Owsley. When we talked initially about hosting this event, this particular event, but also just the Downtown Dialogues, the first name that came to my mind was my friend Sean Owsley, who I've come to know through a professional level in his capacity at Q6. Sean has the sense of humor, he has the intellect, he has the composure, the demeanor, and he has the skill sets and the passion and the love for Spokane. I frankly couldn't think of a better person to host this meeting tonight and to moderate it for us. So Sean, please get us started.
That's a lot to live up to, Mark. I want to thank all of you for being here. All of you there. In my time here, I was born in Spokane. Anybody want to guess which year? Smart, don't guess. 1970. And I've been driving to work to anchor the Wake Up Show for 16 years at KHQ. And over the last couple of years, I drive in at about 3 a.m. in the morning. And I have a firsthand glimpse of how tough this situation has become. And it breaks my heart, honestly. And when Mark called me about a month ago and asked me to be part of this, I said, absolutely. I said, as long as this is a constructive, thoughtful conversation, and let's try and generate some concrete solutions that'll give us some traction to help ease this issue. Because in my mind, from what I've seen firsthand, this is at crisis level. I think we need to all band together, something this region has always done in tough times. And I look forward to the conversation tonight. And we have really thought out how to do this in the most effective manner. And if you have submitted questions in writing, we will try to read some of those. Mark will answer those over the next 30 days on the website. We really want all voices, all ideas to be heard on this issue and try to come up with some constructive solutions. So thanks to all of you, truly, for being here to have this important conversation. Now I'm going to hand the mic over, and I'm going to have our panelists who have great insight and unique insight for their respective positions on the issue of homelessness and what we're seeing right now and how to attack it and how to go at it.
So you have some biographies or a little bit of information about each of us, but just to introduce myself, I'm Jeff Thomas. I'm CEO of Frontier Behavioral Health. We're the largest provider of mental health services in the greater Spokane region. We serve in excess of 20,000 individuals each year. We have 18 different locations, 6 of those right in the immediate downtown area. We are not missioned specifically to serve the homeless population, but by definition, with us serving individuals struggling with mental illness, we serve a lot of individuals who are formerly homeless, who are currently homeless, or who are at high risk of being homeless. So we're very engaged in the process, very committed to the topic that we're here to speak to tonight. And we have a number of services that absolutely I can speak to as we go forward. Some pre-existing services that have been around for quite some time that address the issue of homelessness. Also some new and interesting and innovative partnerships that are very specifically targeted toward individuals who are amongst the homeless population. So I can get into that later if that's of interest.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. My name is Corey Barbieri. I'm currently the chair of the Downtown Spokane Partnership, and it's an honor to be here tonight as the chairperson for the downtown community. Everyone that's in this room tonight, I think, cares about Spokane. I've lived here my whole life too, Sean, 76, a little later, but I do cherish Spokane, and we love Spokane, and everyone in this room loves Spokane. You know, certainly our goal of the Downtown Spokane Partnership is to have a safe and vibrant community. And one thing that we're lacking is the safety in a lot of ways. So some of the things I'm going to talk about also deal with a lot of the property crime issues, things that are happening downtown, and hopefully collectively we can come together as a community to meet these challenges.
Well, good evening. My name is Jonathan Malahan. I'm the Vice President of Housing for Catholic Charities. And Catholic Charities is all about bringing dignity to people who are vulnerable across Eastern Washington, and we do that through a variety of programs. In downtown Spokane, you don't see most of our programs. You see our housing, but we are a healthcare provider. We are a supportive service organization. We are a family organization. We're focused on not just the chronically homeless, but every vulnerable person in our community, creating dignity for them. And I would just say that we're also the organization that has the most units of housing that serve the most vulnerable people in our community. There are other amazing organizations that do the same things that are represented here tonight, but Catholic Charities currently has the most units here in Spokane that serve some of those challenged people here. So we have I think a unique experience and perspective on why that housing is needing, how we're serving that, and also I'm looking forward tonight to the conversation to learn. One of our principles is that we want to be a great neighbor. So we don't want just a safe and secure environment for the people that we serve and our residents. We recognize and know that we have a responsibility to the community as a whole to be an awesome neighbor, and that's part of the reason why we're here tonight. So thanks for your time. I'm looking forward to sharing some information, but also to listening and learning.
My name is Fawn Schott, and I'm the CEO of Volunteers of America. And we are a nonprofit that's been in this community for over 100 years, serving individuals who are homeless and helping them on their journey out of homelessness with the support services they need. We're really rooted in Crosswalk Teen Shelter, so we specialize around teen homelessness, and we run Hope House Women's Shelter. And we get the honor of working with this community every day and helping people really lift from their worst day to a step in the right direction to where they can be part of this community and feel proud of their contribution to this community. So we don't do that alone. We do it with everyone on this panel and everyone in this room and everyone that lives in Spokane. We also have, much like we partner with Catholic Charities, and we have over nearly 200 supported units for individuals exiting homelessness and helping them stabilize in their own units. And it takes a lot of effort and energy, and safety for those individuals is very important. And we, again, like Catholic Charities, we want to be a good neighbor. We coach that, we teach that, we help our individuals understand what a good neighbor is. Safety for them, and we want safety for everyone in this community. So looking forward to this discussion, open to many conversations, and I'm sure I'll learn a lot from this. Thanks.
Thanks, Fawn. I'm Tyson Sasoya, and I own 2 small businesses here in Spokane, and I'm here to offer a perspective from a business owner standpoint. I also live in the downtown area, so as a resident, I see a lot that goes on downtown, and so hopefully I can offer that perspective, and we'll see what we can do as a group here.
Good evening. I'm Craig Baum, the Chief of Police for the Spokane Police Department. Thank you all very much for being here tonight. I am here to offer the Spokane Police Department's insight into what we're seeing, what we're observing, some thoughts, and as you'll hear tonight, it's a very complicated issue. It takes an integrated approach. If you're thinking just law enforcement and booking, that's not going to solve it. If you're thinking just mental health, that's not going to solve it. Drug treatment's not going to solve it. Housing, job, all of that. So what you'll hear tonight is that there is no one single approach that is going to cure this entire thing. It's going to absolutely take an integrated approach. So as we go through tonight, I can definitely talk about some of the challenges that we're seeing and we're facing as well as some of the successes as well.
Hi, I'm Rita Santillanes, and we own the Pepper Tree Plaza on 3rd and Division. But my main hat in life is hospitality, and we own the Best Western Plus Pepper Tree out on Geiger. But I'm also hopefully representing a lot of the hotels in the downtown area who this is really affecting. I sit on the Sports Commission board, and I am concerned about how it's going to affect the convention center and the events that they put in there. So I think I have a good rounded perspective on this.
Good evening. My name is Dawn Kinder. I'm the Director of Neighborhood and Business Services for the City of Spokane. I do know my job. Within my division includes the Community Housing and Human Services Department, which is where I was headed. And that department at the city is responsible for executing on a variety of community engagement strategies, affordable housing solutions, and certainly addressing the topic of homelessness directly through all of our partners here tonight. An additional part of my job is the business engagement and partnership. So I partner closely with the DSP on a variety of topics, and I know I've exchanged emails and calls and meetings with some of you on this topic already. So I'm lucky to have both sides of this within my division and under my leadership at the city, and look forward to having a productive conversation tonight about the complexity of the issue. You heard the chief mention that. I think that's a really key point. This is a complex issue. It's going to take a lot of different stakeholders to really find meaningful solutions. And then also address a little bit where the city is coming from and the strategies we are currently deploying in our community. One thing I would note, part of the handout you got when you came in tonight includes a map of our current homeless system of services, which kind of outlines for you, it's a blocked map on the second or third page of that downtown dialogues sheet, but it kind of shows, in general, the different types of interventions we deploy within the community to try and work with our homeless constituents. And there's also some data, which is just a one-time snapshot of who was homeless in our community on one particular evening last January when we do our mandated count. But hopefully that can spur some questions that I'm happy to address, I'm sure, along with a lot of our other partners who do this work.
Thank you to the panel for being here. Some of the numbers that you have before you, and I do want to read them out loud. There's a lot of people watching on khq.com and on Facebook right now. Really a high interest when we announced we were doing this. Got tremendous feedback of people saying this is hugely important for us right now. Just to show of hands, I'm interested in your take. How many of you feel this is the number one issue we're dealing with right now? Pretty much across the board. Hopefully we can come away with some solutions. Don, I want to start with you. Obviously, getting people off the street. I went out for a run today. It was 30 degrees. It was cold. You get into the evening, and it drops down into very dangerous territory for people that don't have a place to stay. As you can see there, 310 people right now, as of January, unsheltered on city streets. I know recently there was approved out on the west area an absolute emergency shelter to get people out of the cold and maybe push for a couple of others. Can you bring us up to speed on what is happening next with that?
Absolutely. So the city in August started planning for warming centers that would be coming online as our winter approached. So we put out a request for proposals in September, asking agencies and service providers who would be interested or willing in hosting a warming center. We received a very few proposals at that point in time, so we facilitated some stakeholder meetings and did a lot of outreach and partnership building. So we've been working on this a long time. Last weekend, we had our first warming center come online. It's at a building over on Cannon, just west of downtown. It's got capacity for 40 people. We also, of course, have several shelters that operate year-round and will continue to do so, so those are happening. We've got a new center at Salem Lutheran Church that's coming online this week that will have additional capacity for warming center overnight space, and then 3 more we anticipate coming online next week, some targeting certain subpopulations who we know are more vulnerable, and some with just a come one, come all type of access. So those spaces are all coming online. That's, again, in addition to Hope House, House of Charity, the UGM shelters, and several others. Our Family Promise facility had expanded capacity online about 2 weeks ago, so they're sleeping 80 individuals who are a member of a family with children under the age of 18, and Hope House is bringing on more beds as well. So we're a little behind where we had hoped to be at this time, and I'll be honest, we had a lot of challenges getting to this point due to some of the politics and partners being equally leery of taking on some of this difficult work. It's a complex population to serve. So we do have beds online. I will say that the warming center's been open now since Saturday. The one on Cannon Street can sleep 40 people, and the most we have had come utilize it is 20. And last night we only had 10 people in the facility.
Don, I'm going to stay with you for a second. I can tell you're hugely connected to this issue. It's so complex. There's not one panacea, not one solution. And it's a political issue as well right now. How do we all collectively dig deep, find the compassion, remove some of the political red tape? What's being done on that front?
That's a good question. It's complex. I mean, I think one thing that people need to understand is that the homeless individuals that we're serving in our community are also very diverse. So it's not a one solution fits all. And we're working really hard as a system of homeless services and providers to create as many solutions as possible so that people have a place to go to that actually meets their needs when they're ready. And that's complicated work. About 5-10 years ago, the city of Spokane and its partners really thought hard about how are we providing services in this community and what can we do to make it better and more accessible. So we've got coordinated entry systems that where people can come in and assess one time for a variety of services. There's coordinated entry for our households without children that SNAP operates. Catholic Charities operates an assessment center for households with children, and then we also just about 8-9 months ago brought on a separate coordinated entry system just for young adults. So we're working really hard to create solutions that meet those varying needs, and I think that's one thing that people need to realize. Additional point is that many of our homeless individuals in the community you never see downtown, and that's been mentioned I think earlier tonight, but when you look at some of the snapshot numbers from last year, we counted 1,200 approximately homeless people on one particular night last January. And I know that many of you who experience this problem day in, day out are not seeing 1,200 different people on your doorstep or in front of your business or outside your home. And so a lot of our homeless people are very connected with services. They're moving through that system. They're getting housed and moving on with their life, and they're experiencing a temporary crisis when we engage with them. And so that percent that we see as a chronic homeless population downtown is a very small subset of our overall problem. So Spokane has a lot of very successful homeless programs in place that serve our population well. We also have a very high acute population downtown that does struggle with mental health and chemical dependency and other issues, which makes them harder to serve. But we've got incredible agencies like Frontier Behavioral Health and others trying to fill that gap. So the bureaucracy and red tape is one thing, but I think a lot of it really is, this is a very complicated problem, and what people often don't see is how many incredible programs are out there operating every day, moving people through the system. Year to date in Spokane, our coordinated assessment programs have assessed over 7,000 households. So just to give you some kind of grasp on the size we're talking about here, we're talking about over 7,000 households to date have come in to ask for help. And that population that's creating a lot of consternation is a very small subset of that, and that's where we certainly struggle to come up with effective solutions.
If you can hand the mic down to Jeff, I'm going to follow up with Jeff now. Thank you, Dawn. Jeff, Dawn mentioned the mental aspect of this, and I'm going to lean around the pole so I can see you here. The mental piece of this, it's so challenging. There are people out there, I think the biggest number here was lack of income, or why people are homeless. There's so many, a myriad of issues. When you approach each individual, if there is a behavioral issue, talk us from the ground up. How do you approach that? And just for the people that live here, what's the best way for them to approach people that are suffering or may have some mental issues that lead to their current situation?
Yeah, it's a very broad topic. So I think I'll perhaps start as a jumping in point with a bit of context, if I could, and then
Sure.
narrow into the answer to your question. Statistically, somewhere around 20% of individuals who are homeless are living with a serious mental illness. So that's a significant number, but that also means that 80% are not. Also statistically, individuals who are homeless and living with a mental illness are far more likely to be victims of crimes, to be victimized, than they are to victimize others, which is not what you would see in the media, and that's not what you see depicted, and that's oftentimes a myth that's, I think, is worthy of dispelling. And that doesn't mean there aren't times when individuals who are homeless and have a mental illness cannot be violent, but very frequently their violence is precipitated by them being endangered by somebody else, perceived as being endangered. And one of the discussions we have in our organization is the individuals we're serving who are homeless, who amazingly come in for treatment even though they have no place to sleep at night and they don't know where the next meal's coming from. They're sleeping with a weapon under their pillow, whatever that pillow might be, and it's probably not like your My Pillow. And they're doing that because they know the reality. They don't know the statistic, perhaps, but they know the reality that they are highly, highly vulnerable for somebody to be attacking them, to be exploiting them, to be victimizing them in some way. So, to your question of what might somebody do, I think it's important to be mindful that individuals who, if you're talking about folks who are struggling with the symptoms of a mental illness, oftentimes they're going to look a bit strange and it's going to be a bit scary to you, perhaps. They might be talking to themselves. They might be shouting. Oftentimes they're reacting to, the symptoms of their mental illness, which are extremely distressing to them. If you can try and emphasize for just a moment that if you're hearing voices, if you're hearing threats in your head, and they are as real to you as I am talking to you right now, that's scary stuff. And for those individuals, I think to give them some space, to recognize that they're struggling, they are, for the most part, really unlikely to be lashing out at you. They are being tormented. And I think it's not appropriate, it's not helpful to try to intercede with an individual who's symptomatic. That's something that's appropriate for professionals to be doing. but I think also to bring to attention, if somebody does look like they're really struggling, there are, calling law enforcement, calling upon, service providers, especially if you're a business owner and you have some individuals that you're seeing repeatedly who are struggling, call upon our homeless outreach team or our mobile crisis team to come intercede. And we have services that we can at least make an effort to try and engage those individuals. Now, I can go a lot further with this if you want.
No, I do have a follow-up just
Yeah.
on a personal human level. When you walk home into your house and you think about your day and then you come back and you approach it the next day, are you making progress? Or what is your personal thought, your takeaway from each day?
Yeah, well, let me give you a little bit of context on that as well. So I wear 3 hats and I look through 3 lenses, as I said on this panel. One is as a CEO of an organization that provides services to individuals who, as I suggested earlier, have been homeless, are homeless, or might be homeless. I also look through the lens of CEO of a business that has a third of our locations just a couple blocks to the east of here. And our business has been impacted by individuals who are homeless, who are camping out on our property, who are, some of them, using drugs on our property, who, that can be very unsettling for our staff and our highly vulnerable clients who are coming in for services. So I look through the lens as a business, not owner, but CEO as well. I also look through the lens of a resident of downtown Spokane for the last year and a half. And every morning not as early as you, but about 5:30, I'm heading out the door of my condo right downtown and walking a couple blocks, Spokane Club, to get a workout in. And I'm seeing individuals who are homeless, who are struggling. And every once in a while, it's a bit jarring for me, even being in the business, just encountering some of the individuals. I think for me, what I take home from this is I have a chance to see the impact we're having in our services. And I realize that's difficult. I don't want to portray that, gee, we're doing so much, it's all fixed, what's the deal? I get it that there's a deal. Again, I see it from the services, the needs that are unmet as a service provider, as a resident downtown, and as a CEO of a business downtown. And every day we're making headway, we're developing new partnerships, we're coming up with new ways of intervening, and I can elaborate more on that as we go forward. So my take home is one of hopefulness, and we see the stories of success, and we see the individuals who solutions have been at hand and who are getting better, have attained homes. And we work with pretty much everybody on this panel, and many of you in the audience I see work very tenaciously, one by one, making a difference with individuals. And those are the ones that we're not necessarily seeing out on the streets at the moment.
All right. If you, Corey, next, please. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the things that we see downtown as in terms of cleanliness and the folks living on the streets and how vulnerable those folks are. Just in the last 48 hours, and the other hat I wear besides being currently the chair of the Downtown Spokane Partnership is I'm vice president of Goodale and Barbieri Company. So we manage approximately 2,000 residential units, and we also manage about 2 million square feet of office. So we live, eat, and breathe the work, live, eat, play in downtown Spokane. Couple things just on my desk, and every morning we get the reports. And this is hired security that we've decided to choose to hire to advance the police efforts because there's a lack of police downtown. And so we hire security third-party companies to come by and make sure that our tenants are safe, that they can get into the front door of their homes and help. So we have these runs that happen 2 to 3 times a day and 2 to 3 times at night. And, one this morning that stuck out. While I'm conducting my patrol, I came across a male under the influence. After asking him to leave, he did not listen and attempted to get into my security vehicle. I told him to move before using force. I then entered the vehicle and was able to call a crime check. Shortly after, the police came and EMT, and we were able to move the gentleman off to the police station. That was this morning at 3:43. I've got pages of these that we have. There's certainly a crisis for folks in housing downtown. A lot of folks, when I have these security companies that we pay to move, I'm just moving them to my neighbors. Maybe it's a Davenport River Park Square, they're doing the same thing. So it's a game of checkers, and unfortunately, the game of checkers is getting really old, and so hopefully collectively we can fix it and win the game.
All right, thank you, Corey. And Jonathan, obviously, it's a natural transition to you and what you do, the House of Charity. And from your vantage point, you hear business owners are concerned and they are camping out. I see that virtually every day driving to work. What do you say as far as the approach to deal with that issue, at the same time weigh just human compassion, try and connect with somebody? It's so complex because you have to figure out the background of each individual and then tackle it that way. How do you do that?
Good question. I mean, first off, we're blessed that these are the problems that we get to deal with rather than worrying about where we're going to sleep. And that doesn't mitigate or minimize the experience that you have when you have to deal with someone who has erratic behavior and you feel uncomfortable and you don't know how to respond and you don't feel safe. We need to address that. This is a community problem that we need to solve. And in solving it, we need not to harden our hearts to the plight of the most vulnerable in our community who are literally dying on our streets. So Catholic Charities comes at this from a point where we believe it's our job to help. We know we need to help effectively, and if in helping we're having a disproportionate impact on our neighbors in a less than positive way, we need to address that as well. And I think I'd like to just share a little bit about Catholic Charities and our approach. We're also we manage about 1,350 units across Eastern Washington, and a couple 100,000 square feet of commercial space. So we're not as big, but I look at this as a property owner manager as well, that we have significant financial obligations to deliver financially for these properties, but also to create a safe environment for our residents, which is our top concern. So it's important to delineate between someone who is poor and in housing and receiving services and people who are engaging in behaviors that are having these impacts on the surrounding community. Because what we see from the people we serve, Catholic Charities, for even our permanent supportive housing units where we serve the most vulnerable that generally will have that dual diagnosis of behavioral illnesses and substance abuse, we will put 50 people like that in a building, and we say, we're granting you the grace of housing. You don't need to earn that grace. You deserve it because you deserve a place to live. But we also recognize, and this is part of Catholic social teaching, that part of that is you have an accountability to yourself, your family, and your community. And Catholic Charities lives that part of Catholic social teaching in the accountability of our house rules. So that means that people are required as a condition of their residency to conduct themselves in a way that creates a safe environment for themselves and others. Practically that means that if someone is arrested on one of our properties or within 2 miles of our properties, and we receive a notice of arrest from SPD, who we work very closely with, they are evicted from our properties so that we can live our commitment to our neighbors, but also require that our residents are living up to their accountability of creating a safe environment. We don't evict people for their illness, and that means if someone is suffering and they are using drugs and they are exhibiting behaviors related to that drug use, our response to that is not, we're going to evict you. Our response to that is, we are going to help you, and we're going to work with Frontier Behavioral Health. We're going to work with the supportive services that Catholic Charities is able to offer through our many programs to heal that person and help them improve their lives. Catholic Charities invests over $120,000 annually in the properties that we have, just the housing properties. That doesn't include the House of Charity in security alone. And that security doesn't just serve our properties. We extend that to our neighbors' properties. We're working right now with the police department to invest $150,000 annually to bring more police presence to the neighborhoods that we serve and have properties in. And we see that as an investment in the security of our residents. We believe it'll have a great impact in creating a positive impact on the community as a whole, but we have a responsibility to our residents to create a safe environment, and they have that same responsibility as well. So we take that very seriously. But I will say, I'm so glad we're having this conversation tonight, because we have to come at this not from the perspective of those people shouldn't be here in downtown, but how do we help? How do we effectively serve our neighbors and do it in a way that we don't sacrifice the vibrancy of a downtown that requires businesses to grow and thrive.
Jonathan, just quick follow-up that it just popped in my mind, just a rough guess if you have it, percentage of the people that are offered services and resources, how many take it?
You know, I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question. Someone else may have an actual statistic.
Well, as you know, as other panel members have mentioned, that is a complex issue, and there's a complex answer to that question. So one example is we have a homeless outreach team, and that team of a handful of individuals spends pretty much all day, every day, going out and trying to engage individuals who are homeless in parks, under bridges, where have you, anywhere downtown. And so to say what percentage, say, if we went out and handed business cards, hey, go call there, get some help, we have like 0%. Right. So what it takes is a lot of tenacity, and a lot of work to engage individuals, a lot of effort to help them to trust, and offering them oftentimes tangible forms of support, a pair of socks, a coat, something to say, hey, I care about you. I'm not seeing you as just a problem, and you need to go get fixed. So it could be the second time, the third time, the 150th time. You don't know when the next time that engagement effort is going to be the time when the stars align and there's the right circumstance, and that individual is going to accept help. So, I know it doesn't give you a specific percentage, but this last year or year to date, our homeless outreach team has assisted more than 50 individuals who are chronically homeless in attaining housing, and that's not a small number. And that's just one of our programs. We also have other programs that are intervening with individuals who are in crisis who. Like our mobile crisis team, probably about a third of the individuals of the 300 that they're encountering in any given month are homeless. So they're working with them to assist them in engaging in accessing care and resources. Not all of them say yes, and not all the first time. It might be the second or the third or the fourth. Sure. So it's really a stick with it for the long haul. It's a marathon, not a sprint sort of approach. I don't know if that helps.
It does answer, and I thought you saying, a pair of socks or something, you have to start at the absolute ground zero problem. So my next question is to Fawn, and Fawn, Volunteers America. Yes?
I just wanted to offer, because I have one stat to just kind of support what Jeff's point is, and it's not apples to apples, but for our homeless outreach services that the city funds through SNAP, which is an additional outreach component to what Jeff's speaking of that Frontier does, our homeless outreach team, about 64% of people they engage with go from being touched by street outreach to a permanent placement. So it's not necessarily they're saying yes, but within their work with someone, about 64% of people go from streets to a housing solution through that outreach service. And because of that, the city did just almost double our investment in street outreach. So I think it's not exactly saying yes to yes, but
sure.
In theory, our homeless outreach team actually is a very effective way of helping people move from homelessness to services and housing without utilizing the interventions in between. So statistically in social services, 65% is massive. I know in business, that's not the number you're shooting for necessarily, but on the social service side, that's a very high figure.
Thank you, Don. Fawn, with Volunteers of America, give us a snapshot of how you approach this, how you look at it, how you deal with it, what you've experienced.
Sure. Excuse me. We truly look at each individual as an individual. Every individual that walks in our door has a history of trauma and violence. Generally, then that's why they're in our door. So safety and security is utmost our first priority, and we generally reach them through our shelter programs at Crosswalk and Hope House for women. And then from there, individuals move into permanent housing. So we really do have to address the fact that violence is part of, they've been affected by violence, and we have to address the trauma related to that. And so oftentimes, behaviors that we normalize when we've never experienced trauma and homelessness as individuals, we will see come out in those individuals. And we might see it as this is a really bad behavior. It's non-conforming. But really, it is them trying to heal from their trauma. So we really approach this with a health and housing approach. And first off, we house. And that generally means an individual comes to shelter, because we cannot address what they need if we can't build that relationship with them, much like street outreach. We need that hands-on. We need to talk to them. We need to understand, what do you need today to take the first step to your goals so you can become stable, so you can address your mental health, so you can reduce substance using if you are. So really is that first approach is, let's get you into shelter. We hear oftentimes, does shelter work? Why are we investing as a community in shelter? And shelter does work. We have a 70% successful outcome from Crosswalk Teen Shelter of either family reunification because they're under the age of 18, or permanent housing and safe and stable housing at the time that they turn 18. We also have nearly 40% of the women that walk in the door at Hope House Women's Shelter that find housing. And sometimes that's supported housing, and sometimes that's market rate because they work a job, but they just needed that first step up. And sometimes it's addressing their safety and their well-being, and it might take us 3 or 4 months of that relationship. So we believe in shelter, we believe in housing, and we wrap that with addressing trauma through health care, physical health, mental health, as well as substance use.
All right, thank you, Fawn. Tyson, you have 2 businesses.
Yes.
You want a safe environment. You want to bring people downtown. Obviously, if you go downtown today compared to the early 1990s, it's a vibrant downtown area. People are moving there to live. And
that's why we moved in. I mean, that, it was building. It
Yeah.
looked like it was going in a good direction.
yeah. And so as a business owner, your perspective.
Really, safety is our biggest concern. I mean, the perception that Spokane downtown is unsafe keeps people away from downtown. Now, I mean, most of the people here might live downtown or spend a lot of time downtown, but I have people on the north side or in the valley that just won't come downtown anymore. What they see on the news is someone got stabbed, someone got shot, and downtown's unsafe. And that's just, that's a popular belief these days. And enticing people to come downtown and patronize your business when there's an appearance that it's unsafe to walk the streets downtown. And it's not entirely untrue. I mean, I live downtown and I feel a lot safer because I know the streets. But when someone comes in and they see people acting erratically, or they see fights, or they see drug use, or homeless people, camped out all over the streets, it makes them feel unsafe. And we need to somehow fix that image.
I'm just curious, when somebody says that to you, what do you do? What do you say to them directly to try to break that perception?
I always try to downplay it and tell them it's not that bad. And I always say, hey, I live there. I'm down there all the time. Look at me, I'm fine. But I don't, it's not necessarily the truth. It is unsafe downtown. I mean, I've seen there's been a lot of violence, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And Jeff and I were talking about it earlier. It's not necessarily homeless people that are like committing crimes, or it's not necessarily mentally ill people that are committing crimes. We don't know who those people are. It may be a criminal committing a crime that's just like robbing someone or whatever.
Sure.
They might not be part of the homeless population or the mentally ill population. But we don't have those statistics, so we don't really know. But the crime's there nonetheless. So.
All right. Thank you, Tyson. If we can go to the Chief next. Chief, obviously safety a key issue. We know what the crime numbers are. Certain crimes have been rising lately. Specifically in the downtown metro area, as the Chief of Police, on this issue, what is your concern? I know you have a concern for the officers. You have concern for people that are really calling their streets home right now. How do you tackle that on a day-to-day basis? What do you tell your patrol officers? How do you advise them to approach somebody that may have been on the street for a while, may be mentally unstable, violent, something a lot of people walk by, they're compassionate and upset about, but they don't truly understand?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we, first I'll talk about some of the successes that we've had as the Spokane Police Department. One of the things that you've heard earlier is that we received a grant through the state called a True Blood Grant. And basically what that has allowed us to do is partner up Spokane police officers with caseworkers from Frontier Behavioral Health. So they're in the vehicles with the officers for the entire shifts. I believe right now we have 3 of 4. We're working on getting that 4th person as well. What their goal is to go out and deal with these folks that are having a mental health crisis right at that moment and try to divert them from the emergency rooms, from the jails, get them lined up with some long-term services as well, as opposed to an officer goes there because of the call load that we have, we put a Band-Aid on it and we move on to the next call. So our agency is a call-driven agency. So when an officer logs on at the beginning of every shift, they pull up their MDC screen, the mobile data computer, and there's a list of calls waiting for them. So typically what you've seen is that SPD has responded, we deal with it through an arrest, through a report, and then we move on. What the True Blood Grant has allowed us to do is to actually divert these folks out of the jails, out of the emergency rooms, and then get them lined up with some long-term services. Another thing that we're doing is we're working to build what's called a mental health crisis stabilization facility. It's a 16-bed facility. It'll probably be about another year or so till we have that open. But what that will allow us to do is take some of these folks, specifically in the downtown area, that are causing some of these quality of life issues, the lewd conducts, the disorderlies, the thefts, but if they have some kind of mental health issue, rather than take them to jail where they may not get the treatment that they need, this crisis stabilization facility, the intent of that is to get them long-term care, line them up with all the different resources that will be at some point established in what we're calling the Envision Center. And so we will actually bring the services to these individuals as well. And it's a complex problem. So, all of our officers have crisis intervention training, which is dealing with folks who are having a mental crisis at that moment. That's typically when we deal with them, right? So people don't call the police when someone is just walking down the street or doing what they're supposed to be doing or what the community expects them to do. It's when they're having that mental health crisis. We actually have evolved into an enhanced CIT, working with staff from Frontier Behavioral Health as well. And this is basically crisis intervention training on steroids. And it's using the motivational interviewing tools to try to talk these folks out of whatever crisis they're having to get them lined up with those long-term services. So we have the community court downtown. That's open every Monday. And that just has a laundry list of services that we offer to individuals who may have housing concerns. They may have mental health concerns, drug concerns, dental concerns, how to get an ID, how to find a job. So we're also working with trying to divert them from the jail, but not just for the sake of diverting from the jail, diverting them to get them the long-term services that they need. So our downtown folks really concentrate on using those tools.
And Chief, I understand in the budget right now is 10 more officers for your department. Does that help make an impact and help augment what you're trying to do?
Yeah, that will help. That will help some with crime overall. This isn't anything that I'm revealing. The City Council is potentially interested in going out for a levy for 20 more officers. So one of the problems we'll see that will illustrate what the staffing issues we're having that does impact the downtown as well. So if you look at property crimes throughout the city, and that's one of our common concerns that we hear from the community is property crimes, and a small percentage of offenders create a gross disproportionate amount of our property crimes. But if you look at property crimes throughout the city, on any given week, we can assign about 20% of the workable property crime cases just because of the number of detectives that we have. That affects downtown as well. You also hear from the businesses downtown that we're having property crime issues downtown. And the people who are committing these crimes, they don't stop at the downtown borders and say, well, I'm not going to go outside the downtown. They're throughout the whole city. So what we're looking to do as well is ramp up our property crimes detectives in some of the other detective areas where we haven't been able to work the cases that we've wanted to. The levy that we're looking at in February, if that passes, we'll assign an additional 5 officers specifically to the downtown quarter. So what that does is those 5 officers increase the number of officers in the downtown quarter by 50%, which obviously is going to have a huge impact as well. One of the things, too, going to the nightlife downtown, Friday and Saturday nights, everybody knows Friday and Saturday nights downtown tend to be the busiest. So we actually pay officers to come in every Friday and Saturday night, and they do nothing but patrol the downtown area. So you should be seeing officers Friday and Saturday night coming downtown, walking around the downtown area, going through the businesses, greeting people, saying hi, and trying to keep the peace as well. So we're looking at a number of different approaches to try to create a safer downtown corridor.
Thank you, Chief. Rita, as a business owner in our area, you've heard everything here. Your perspective.
Well, I look at my property on 3rd and Division as the gateway to Spokane. And to be honest, when we started construction there around 3.5 years ago, if downtown Spokane looked the way it looks today, we wouldn't have invested the money that we invested there. And never in my life did I think that I would be picking up human waste in a plastic bag more than once. Never did I think that I would have things thrown on my employees' cars that they did not know what was in those cups being thrown in their cars. Never did I think I would be monitoring my corner, telling people to get off the corner because I owned that land and they were trespassing, and how many people I've had to trespass off that corner. And with the new sit and lie, they just moved to the sidewalk now, so I can't even get rid of them. I have compassion. I have a lot of compassion, and I too worry about these people, but I also worry about how I'm going to make my mortgage payment every month. And the other part of my business is hospitality. My hotel may not be downtown, but if the hotels downtown are not full, I'm not going to see compression. And if I was a tourist coming off a Division, looking at what they see when they first come in Division, I wouldn't book a convention. I wouldn't book a sporting event. It would make all the difference in the world to me. And I live and die by tourism. I own 4 hotels, one of them here in Spokane. And it's an impossible situation right now downtown. I will say the police department is fantastic. When we have a problem, they're there for us. But the situation has gotten totally out of hand.
I do think it's nationwide, though. You go into any city and you go into the gateway, you're going to see similar.
Well, I could disagree. I have hotels in other cities that I don't see the problem. I have a hotel in Napa, Idaho, right outside of Boise. Mm-hmm. You don't see the homelessness. I have one in Bend, Oregon. You don't see the homelessness. I don't know how they're avoiding it. I don't know if they're doing it illegally or legally, but you don't see the problem, and you can see their tourism growing. And we're going to have a tourism problem here if we do not get control of this situation.
All right. We are. As you came in, we asked you if you had a question you want to submit them, and we are drawing these at random. We have a basket here that I'll pull from and ask the question. Yeah, Jonathan.
Could I just add a piece of
Sure.
the challenge of homelessness in other cities? Because I think there's the common misperception that Spokane is somehow a city that has a disproportionate amount of people experiencing homelessness. In fact, the exact opposite is true. Let me ask people in the audience here, how many people here feel like Salt Lake City has a great grapple on how they address homelessness? You may have seen lots of folks. You've seen the media there, the city that solved homelessness, the mayor traveling around the country to share his perspective on solving homelessness. Well, you've seen from our data, we have just over 300 people who are unsheltered on our streets on any given day, and the metro area of Spokane is the same size as the metro area of Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City turns 1,000 people away onto their streets every morning. They're the city that solved homelessness. When we traveled with the mayor and community leaders to Salt Lake City, Portland, and Boise, they were asking us, how does Spokane do it? How do you all work together? How did you get your coordinated entry system into place? How are you spending less money per outcome getting people housed than we are? And the takeaway from that is we don't do a great job telling our story, and I agree. It is not good that people drive into our city and see people suffering on our streets. That has a huge impact on business, and we have to solve that. But it would be folly for us to jump to the conclusion that somehow Spokane has erred and that we are the problem with our approach. We are leading in this country for how to address these issues systematically, and I don't want to discount Rita's experience. That's not my intent. That is a huge concern, and I want to be part of the solution to making sure she doesn't have to worry about her business. But it shouldn't come at the cost of the people who are most vulnerable here in the community. I think we can all hopefully agree to that.
Let's get to your questions, and we'll pull these at random. The ones that don't get answered, Mark will personally answer each and every one of them on their website over the next 30 days. First question comes from Rick. It says, I understand the need to provide more services for people who are homeless, but doesn't that attach more people from outside our area and attract them and increase the community problems that we are already experiencing? Who would like to tackle that question?
Just hold on to this for a while, I think. We get that question a lot, and I think there's some data in your handout. 72% of the people that our system serves are from Spokane, and the vast majority of those other 28% are from what we would consider our region of eastern Washington, northern Idaho, and western Montana. So that statistic is just simply not supported from data. That being said, the city certainly takes the perspective that we are a metro region between very, very wide space, rural spaces. And so we do draw people from rural communities who surround us, and we don't think that's a bad thing. We believe that it is our responsibility to serve the region that we're positioned within. So when our community housing and human services team looks at this, we're looking at are these individuals who are coming to seek services coming from our region? And by far and wide, the answer is yes. We certainly do have people that when we ask the question, where are you from, or what was your most recent zip code, that have further reaching addresses, but many of them did not come here homeless. Many of them came here for a job, they came here for family, they came here for a romantic relationship, and that dissolved once they were here and they became homeless. And so we do ask that question at the annual point in time count. We ask, what was your last zip code of residence? Or how long have you been in the Spokane region? And it holds true over time that about 70 to 75% of individuals are from within our city, and the vast majority are beyond that are from nearby. So we do provide a wealth of services in our community, but most communities do who are of Spokane size or likewise. So as Jonathan mentioned, we travel to Boise and Salt Lake and Portland, and we've been to many, many other communities as well who are like size to Spokane. And our problem is proportional to the size of our city. We are not a city whose homeless crisis is far beyond what a metro area 500,000 should look like. There is a reality that the majority of our services are, at least those direct acute services, are in the downtown Spokane space. But we have housing programs that reach far into the county, out into the valley, and all across the area as well. I mean, our Catholic Charities organization here serves all of eastern Washington. So we serve a broad space, but we don't attract people to the community.
Next question is from Beth McRae. It says, how do we know the shelters work? How do they fit into the big picture of homelessness? So
one of the handouts you got is kind of our homeless system map, and I will do my best to not bore you with bureaucratic language this evening, but part of our homeless system is actually a federal mandate about what the federal government will fund. So the city administers about $8.5 million a year between state, federal, and local resources specifically for the homeless population. The federal funds come from particular intervention types. So you'll see on that color block sheet, there's things like homeless outreach and shelter on the left-hand side, and as you move right, you see more permanent long-term solutions like permanent supportive housing or even market rate housing. Shelters are a key entry point for people in crisis. They're also a key space where we build rapport with people. As you might be able to imagine or have imagined yourselves, people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness have often experienced significant trauma. And so their initial inclination is not to trust everyone that they engage with, and many of them don't know what that system looks like or how it operates until they need it. So if any of you in the audience became homeless today, it's quite likely the only services that you would even know about are our shelters. It's the first stop. Most of our residents don't know where the housing units are that VOA manages. You couldn't walk up to one of those and ask for help, but you would know where those shelters exist, where UGM is, where House of Charity is, where Hope House is. So they're a key point of where we greet people, where we welcome them into the system and begin to understand what their needs are to provide services. We also know that shelters need to serve a diverse group of individuals. So we have them targeted by population, but we also have them targeted by where in their own personal life are they at in the ability to access help. So we've got UGM, which serves an incredibly important space for our community. We also have House of Charity that serves an incredibly important space for our community, and they're serving different groups of individuals. So we know that they are a successful beginning point for individuals. Our goal is to move them through the system and out of shelter as quickly as possible. Shelter is a temporary solution. It is not a long-term solution to homelessness. I think what Spokane really needs to continue investing in, and we're seeing, is those long-term housing solutions. So as many of you have likely heard the city discuss, we have a huge crisis around affordable housing, and of housing at almost every income level. Our real estate market in general is a very short inventory. But we lack affordable housing, so we might get somebody from a shelter into a supported apartment somewhat quickly. But then once that person is stabilized in their apartment, we don't have that next level of housing to move them into to open up a space. So we've got a lot of housing work to develop, and we're certainly doing that in partnership with nonprofits. The mayor and I just met this week with some credit union leadership who wants to help us figure out how they can play a role in solving the problem locally. But without shelters, people don't have a first front door to get accessing help, and that's really what shelters do, is provide that front door for individuals in need or in crisis.
All right. Next question is directed to Catholic Charities, so I'd like Jonathan to answer it if he can. How many cities have you researched and learned successful management for permanent homeless housing?
Well, I think when Catholic Charities got into the business of managing permanent supportive housing, we looked across the nation at best practices, and that, you know, these models of housing are in many cities. I know the Seattle's DESC is a huge influence on the industry as a whole, and we certainly looked and visited their housing. Personally, I've been to, you know, Salt Lake City, Portland, and others to see their forms of permanent supportive housing. And we incorporated their best practices from the building design into the operational management of those buildings into our properties. So a lot of thought goes into the design and operations of our properties. We iterate on that design and adapt locally as we build more buildings. And so as you see, we continue to develop in Spokane, and our last two downtown properties developing here over the next 12 months being constructed. They include design features that mitigate the impact that they have on the surrounding community, and while still being, we believe, aesthetically pleasing buildings. So things like interior garbage chutes so that the dumpster is not open to the public, interior courtyards so our residents have a place that they can be enjoying their outside spaces without being on the street. So we've got gated courtyards that are going to be going on to our future buildings, improving the amenities inside, providing smoking areas, changing how the staff desks are arranged so you have better visibility across the common spaces in the buildings. Those are all things that we do and have learned from other agencies to make sure that we're providing great permanent supportive housing.
Next question comes in from Valerie. Why do we allow cities to purchase one-way bus tickets for homeless people to Spokane?
A couple things. One, we can't control what other cities provide for those in need, so I can't call Portland and say, please stop. Also, a lot of that story was not thoroughly true. So what often happens is we, in Spokane, most people don't know, and I'm going to out us, we do provide a small service to help people return home if they became homeless in Spokane, or they're homeless here and want to go stay with grandma in Portland. We do have a provider that will help facilitate that transportation. That transportation comes with a couple requirements that you don't hear about often when these stories break the news. So when we send someone on a bus to Portland, let's say we're reuniting them with their grandmother, there's a few requirements. One is that you have to have a provider there that you're ready to engage with, who's going to provide case management services to you to make sure that you're stable in your new community. You also have to have a residence that you're going to that is a family or friend who your case manager has spoken to and is aware of your arrival and willing to house you when you get there. And then there's 30, 60, 90-day checkups and follow-ups, et cetera. So there are often attempts to reunify family. We are not simply busing people away from our city at any point in time. But many of those programs that you hear about are an attempt to reunify individuals with family or friends who know they're coming and are prepared to assist them in their own stabilization and future success. So most importantly, I can't make other cities not do that, and their programs look exactly like ours.
And just to add to that, this came up about a year or two ago as well. There's actually a court case, not in Washington State. There's one city that was sending all of their homeless to another city with a one-way ticket. That city took the other city to court. This came from City Legal, and they lost. So legally, unless you have a family member or that support service, you can't just ship them off to another city. It's been ruled by the courts to be illegal.
Sure.
At Hope House Women's Shelter, we do see individuals coming from other cities because they're fleeing domestic violence. We are one of the main large communities from Montana, Nevada, Oregon, and our own rural areas. So if you experience in Spokane County domestic violence and you have nowhere to go, oftentimes a relative will put you on a bus to get downtown to Spokane so that you can flee domestic violence, where you will spend some time at the shelter in order to find permanent housing. So we do see that increase with domestic violence victims strictly because they're fleeing.
Next question is from Dean. It says, can the city build more public restrooms?
So sorry. Not normally behind a mic. Public restrooms are a very complicated topic, and I know the chief can weigh in on this as well, but they also do create other challenges. And so there are public restrooms available to those experiencing homelessness. I know many of your businesses get impacted by that as well. So we do still have a handful of porta potties that are available underneath the I-90 viaduct. But in general, what we want people to do is go to a service provider, access a shelter, try a coordinated assessment site, engage in services, and utilize restrooms in those facilities so that they're actually connecting with the service and can attempt to receive help along with a basic human need. We certainly understand that, that there is a challenge currently in our community with people using the outdoors as a restroom, and we certainly don't condone or support that kind of behavior. We're working very closely with DSP on various cleaning mechanisms to try and mitigate for some of those impacts. City Hall is certainly being impacted right now by that, so I have complete empathy over that. I understand that's real. I've worked in homeless shelters, so I understand that challenge. But creating unmonitored public restrooms can create additional challenges that create other public safety problems and public health concerns that we also don't want to create space for. So our real hope is that people will find a shelter, find a service provider, or use any of the other restrooms that are available during business hours, not just in businesses individually, but also through parks. The City Hall bathrooms are open, but we primarily want people to find services and utilize space there.
Next question comes from Ryan. What does the line between compassion and tough love look like for you and your organization and for Spokane as a whole?
Do you want each of us to answer that, or just the good-looking ones?
Which is the whole panel.
Okay, so I'll start. That's a great question, and obviously there's no right answer. Those of us in law enforcement who get these calls day after day, we deal with a lot of the same people. I think it's fair to say we're compassionate about the plight of these folks. I don't think many of us drive past homeless people and look at them and say, but for the grace of God, that could be me because of any number of things, and there's so many variables involved. One of the statistics real quickly is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Association. It indicated, for example, on addiction, that for every 10 people that are addicted, there's one bed available for someone who is addicted. And on average, it's going to take someone 4 to 7 times to beat that addiction. I think most people's compassion runs out after about 2 or 3 times. They're like, we're done with you, time to move on. Whereas statistically, it's going to take 4 to 7 times. Mental health, same thing. We have state agencies that are penalized for having too many people in their mental health facility, so they're pushing folks out because they obviously don't want to pay those fines as well. So all of this leads to folks being out in a situation where the police have to deal with them. And there's a series of events that led to them being there. And I will say we are part of the solution, but we are not the solution. So for us, I think it's safe to say we do have compassion, but I also say one of the things we see officers who have that, they can look real hard or jaded or firm. Just like probably most other people, there's a point where you can get compassion fatigue. And one of the things we've started doing at InService is trying to help officers keep that compassion, and you have to work at keeping that compassion. So if you see the same thing over and over again, we're biological creatures, it's natural, it's a tendency to get that compassion fatigue. So I think we have it, but I also think that at times, much like many of you in here, when we're dealing with the same folks, and we don't see a solution because all of these other areas are underfunded, I think it can lead a little bit to that frustration on our part as well.
Thank you, Chief. How about a hand for our panel for being here and making themselves available? When Mark called me about a month ago, he stressed strongly that this would be the initial conversation and try to get the topic on the table. And Mark, if you can come up, I just actually have a couple of questions for you about where do we go from here. And the panel, thank you all very much. You don't need notes. This is the rapid fire round.
Well, it is, but I think if it's okay with you, Sean, we have it's 10 till, and we started a little bit late. I'd like to maybe make sure we ask one more key question, because I think a lot of folks are wondering this, and that is, we've heard a lot of, and this was very important, right? A lot of our great, well-articulated points in terms of the different perspectives. We know as panelists, we know as a community, with all that great work, we still have challenges. Not only we are underserving some of these populations in terms of, we've talked individually about the deficiency in funding for mental health. We've talked about the deficiency in funding for our substance abuse. Thank you. I was looking for the term. We're also wrangling with the byproducts of that lack of funding and lack of services in those areas, which primarily are, I think, are for our business community, are really some of the biggest impacts. It's how do we help our folks that are suffering from mental illness off of our street in better and stronger numbers? How do we help our folks that are suffering from addiction off of our streets in greater numbers? Because those are the individuals, not only the most vulnerable, they're the most at crisis themselves, but they're also putting our downtown and our community in the most level of crisis, as we heard. It's the erratic behavior, the illicit behavior, the behavior that normal social norms wouldn't anticipate or wouldn't tolerate, like an individual that's stripping out in front of the hotel yesterday while somebody's touring them around trying to showcase us for a new convention. And so very real challenges. How do we hone in on some of these while not losing? Certainly, it has to, starting with the human being. How do we focus on that human being and their needs so that we can then turn and help our community? I guess I'd like some interaction on that, if you don't mind. I think we have, I guess my point is, I think if you're okay, we have until about 10 after, since we started 10 minutes late.
I'm fine. I'll stay here all night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Who wants to take his question?
Well,
Jeff?
apparently the mic worked its way down to me really quickly.
Came
here.
right to you, didn't it?
So the gist of your question, Mark, I guess, is kind of how do we go about tackling this together? I mean, in essence. And, and part of the question before was how do we deal with compassion, but also tough love? And I guess what I would say is, again, looking through the lens of the various hats I wear, the greatest opportunities reside in building upon and cultivating new partnerships. Because we can't just keep doing what we've been doing. And what we've been doing, I don't want to minimize that. There are many good things, or the problems would be worse. That said, what we're doing isn't as effective as any of us want it to be, or we wouldn't be where we're at. So when I look at, the opportunities, Jonathan's shop is building a 50-unit building, literally maybe 12 feet from one of our offices, and there's going to be additional opportunities for us to partner and look at how do we try new ways of providing our support services in your housing, and how do we probably make some mistakes along the way, but figure our way through it and stick with it for the long haul. As the chief mentioned, we have co-deployed clinicians with law enforcement. We also have that model that we've begun with Spokane Fire Department. We're going to be starting that soon with the Sheriff's Department. There are models out there that demonstrate that can have a huge impact on helping individuals who would otherwise be not only in emergency departments or incarcerated or homeless to be receiving the services they need. And some of our team and the police department's team visited a program that's been in effect for quite some years in Los Angeles. We're learning from other communities. I think models like that are the ones where we're going to be finding the greatest opportunity, the intersect points between our organizations, the gaps that have existed between service silos in the past, between what law enforcement is encountering, what they're doing, fire department. I don't know if you knew this. We have a captain of Spokane Valley Fire Department on our board. He said more than 85% of the calls they go on have nothing to do with putting out a fire. Right? Nothing to do with putting out a fire. It's dealing with individuals who oftentimes are struggling with the sorts of symptoms of substance use, of mental illness. So having co-deployed teams working with those who are out on the streets, law enforcement, who, by the way, we found to be highly compassionate in their interactions with folks. Our staff are continuously, repeatedly impressed with how they endure some of the challenges that they're facing, which wasn't probably what they signed up for when they said, I want to be a cop. But I think, again, those opportunities, and with the housing providers, we're finding more and more opportunities all the time. We just need to be vigilant across our organizations and across our respective domains. I don't know if that gets at anything close to what you're wanting, Mark, but that's my tab at it, because the mic ended up on my lap.
That's well said, Jeff. I'd just add, I think we do have certainly a housing crisis for affordability and low income. Fortunately, we have Catholic Charities and others like that here in Spokane, or it would be a lot worse. But with that, we need to not only locally but state, federally ask for more dollars, for more housing, because frankly, from police and servicing these folks, if they have a roof over their head, 9 times out of 10, it's going to cut back on the demands of every taxpayer to get the help and health that they need, and that's proven. This panel has been very enlightening to me over meeting with them and learned a lot, and I tell you, I think as a community we can do great things.
You know, this is the key question, and we all need to continue working together and continuing this dialogue on. I do want to, I would be remiss of me not to share with you, it is a logical fallacy for us to say the things that we're doing now are not working just because we're still having problems. Homelessness, the pressure of more people entering onto homelessness is the affordability of housing. For every $100 increase in property or housing expenses, you can expect a 6.5% increase in homelessness. That's across the country, not just in Spokane. Every time Catholic Charities opens up a permanent supportive housing building, the number of chronically homeless individuals, which is that band at the most vulnerable, at the people that have the highest need, they're called chronically homeless. That number goes down every time we open up a building. So it is working. It is reducing the burden on emergency services, hospitals, police officers in responding to those needs, to the tune of about $80,000 savings to the taxpayer for every person we put into our property every year. So we need to continue looking at the strategies we have in place that are successful, investing in those strategies, improving on them, but also adapting, because we can't continue to have businesses that are feeling pressure like they're going to go out of business. So I think we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We really do need to have these conversations, but we should also not jump to the conclusion that housing those who are most in need is somehow creating the problem. It's solving the problem, and we have the data to show that.
Anybody else want to respond to Mark's question?
I'll just quickly add, to build on mental health, we can't address mental health if an individual's on the street. There's absolutely no way to address a mental health need. So housing is critical. To build on, we need multiple layers of housing for individuals, from homeless housing to low-income housing. We have less than 1% vacancy rate, and that is a market rate in our community. We used to, at Volunteers America, for our 185 units that we support in our community all over Spokane County, we used to have a move-out rate of people who would stabilize of nearly 25%. People would no longer need us, and they'd move out and they'd be on their own. We have our less than 10% can move out now because there's no affordable units to move to. So we really have this stopgap of, even if we can't address mental health without housing, and we don't have a step-out program for an individual who stabilizes to move out of support services. So as a community, if we don't address this holistically as a housing issue and a housing stock issue, we're going to have this same conversation in 5 years.
So Mark, real quick to answer from the law enforcement perspective. So for the last 2 years, we've tried to get the state to bring back property crime supervision for folks that are just getting released from prison. We're the only state in the country with no property crime supervision, which means if you get sentenced for property crime, not violent crime and no drug crimes, but if you just do a property crime and you get out, there's no property crime supervision. And I was at a meeting with the governor late last year where he said we're also the #1 state in the nation for property crime recidivism. So how does that tie into the mental health and the drug use as well is, if you talk to our downtown folks, they're going to tell you that at least with the folks they encounter, the vast majority have co-occurring disorders. They have mental health and drug issues. Either one caused the other or created the other. So one of the things we're working on, again, with the city is to bring back property crime supervision to the state. So what that means is folks if they get sent away, they get stabilized, they're taking their medication, they're in a stable environment, and then they get released, there's going to be some folks there that are going to help them stay on the right track for their benefit, and that only benefits the community as well. So you'll see a big push in 2019 for the city of Spokane to try to bring property crime supervision back to the state, and that will hopefully help with some of these issues. We can't solve this issue as a city by ourselves. If you read any of the literature, they'll say this is a national, state, and a local issue, and there is no way this city itself is going to solve this. That doesn't absolve us of making an effort, but to really get to solving it at the level we want to, we need to get the state and the nation involved as well.
I just want to say that we as the businesses on this panel, we understand that there's a crisis, and it's a sad crisis, but our city council needs to really back our police department and try to help them solve the problem. And when they don't support things like the sit and lie law, which help our businesses survive, it really affects us.
I'll add quickly, I know people are wrapping up here, but I think the city's really looking at additional innovative ways we can work together with business to tackle this issue. I know Mark and I have this conversation all the time. How do we partner with businesses to both ensure that businesses can grow and thrive, but also that those most vulnerable get services? So you'll see programs like HopeWorks, where we are trying to reach out to those on the street and get them engaged in some type of opportunity for work during that day, with the real intent of connecting them to the services Goodwill offers. At the end of that, we've got the Give Real Change campaign, where we encourage folks to donate directly to Give Real Change as opposed to individuals on the street, so that we can funnel those resources to an agency. Those dollars are leveraged far more when we're able to give them to a nonprofit than when they're just handed to somebody on the street. And we certainly are constantly working with police on SEPTED design and things we can do downtown to support business. So I reach out. We'd love to talk and meet with you. It's going to take the business community helping us in this. If there was an easy fix, I swear I would have done it. That's the hard part here. And so as we've traveled, we see a lot of opportunities where businesses can help partner with things like work experience and job shadowing and mentorships and practicing interviewing. And they're little things, but when you add up and you're somebody in trauma with no work experience and no history, you need that practice, that connection, that mentorship, and a variety of other ways that we think business can help. So I look forward to working with Mark on that going forward, and I know that these conversations will continue, this is a great beginning, so thank you guys very much.
Thank you to the panel. Bring Mark back.
Good. Thank you, Sean. Before I ask you all to give these folks and Sean, our moderator, a big hand, I have just a couple of comments on behalf of the Downtown Spokane Partnership. A couple of things I wanted to kind of tie up, put a little bit of a tie in that were mentioned. One, if you're not familiar with what SEPTED is, that's crime prevention through environmental design. I know Catholic Charities, John, you just mentioned the other day that you had at one point, and I don't put you on the spot, but I know Catholic Charities had, as being part of that Good Neighbor, had offered up even supported funding for their neighbors. As I know the city had a pot of money for a while. What that is essentially you inviting an officer into your property, having them do an assessment, and really looking at how we could take a better control over our own real estate or over our own property. I can't stress the importance of that enough when we think about safety. The reason why lighting and cameras and landscaping, making sure you have clear signs, lines of sight, and those kinds of things are important because people that are up to no good or are not interested in doing those in broad daylight typically. And so how do you help, I think, be part of the solution? Does take a little bit of an investment on your part to better prepare yourself and your staff by making sure your own real estate is safe and well lit. The other thing I want to point out, I think it wasn't really talked on today except for the Give Real Change campaign. I don't know how many folks are aware, but I want to really speak to our audience at home. As I've talked to dozens and dozens of folks in the service industry, including our panelists today, one of the things that I hear consistently from them is that if we could only convince our community to change its mindset around giving money to panhandlers. And that's why we invest our time and energy in working with the city on the Give Real Change campaign. It's why we created the Hope Works program, where now today with our Goodwill partner and Catholic Charities and Spokane Transit, we're now out providing 3 days a week. We're engaging with our panhandlers and offering them day employment opportunities as well as access to services, workforce development training, and resources. Why we do those things is because if an individual, which unfortunately the handful of the percentage of folks that we are dealing with that are the most challenging to our customers do have, unfortunately, they're subject to this really global epidemic of chronic, addictions. And if we are putting $1 in their pocket, we are making it nearly impossible for them to be motivated, to be compelled to reach out to a service provider to get the help they need. If they're getting their next dollar to serve their addiction, they are less likely to go ask Fawn for help. They are less likely to go ask John and his team for help. One of the best ways we as a community can help solve and be a part of this is save up your dollars and send them to a charity that runs well and that serves this population. Give as much as you possibly can, but put it in the hands of these professionals so that we, by changing this behavior, we are going to compel that individual to go reach out to those service providers. That's where they're going to have the most likelihood, the best chance of changing their life. If they are suffering from addiction, it's not going to be you giving them $1. It's going to be them going to get help and a professional sitting down with them and say, hey, Susie, John, is it time? Can we help you? We've got treatment, right? We know that we have deficiencies in services in terms and funding for mental health. We know we have substance abuse funding deficiencies. I think we as a community need to speak to our legislators and our federal government about making sure to restore some of those funds that have been depleted over the last handful of years, because that issue, again, those issues are not going away. We need to be a part of those solutions. One of the things that you can do to help in that is by engaging respectfully with cogent arguments. I'm so excited all of you who are here tonight. I hope that you continue to learn. I hope you continue to do your research. I hope that we can all come to this conversation focusing on the human being, but not be ashamed that we also are focusing on our coworkers, our employees, our bosses, who are trying to eke out a living. That's important too. And let's not forget that where those tax dollars come to help fund all of these programs is coming from all of our business community leaders that are in this audience today and that are at home, trying their best, working 60, 80, 100 hours a week to try to eke out a living. If we aren't protective of that interest as well, then the revenue for the services for those people in need dries up. Everybody loses. So as a community, I'm just asking that if you're thinking through a lens tonight that says, well, I think all businesses that are complaining, they're just a bunch of ogres. They don't have any sensitivity. They don't have a heart. I plead with you tonight, take the time, get out of your easy chair, get out of these chairs, go visit with them. Go visit their shop, go visit with their employees, and hear from them the plight that they're dealing with when they're encountering the kinds of behavior that you would not be able to dream of by this small percentage, but very impactful percentage of our homeless population who are suffering from mental health and addiction, and then help be part of that solution. And as you mentioned, I'm going to give another plug, and that's for the sit and lie ordinance. There's a lot of myth around the sit and lie ordinance criminalizing homelessness. We worked extremely hard to craft that ordinance in a holistic way, and I'm going to run through this real quickly. We've got 1 minute left by my clock. The sit and lie ordinance was crafted in a way that the officer has to provide information on resources available in their first encounter. That's a must. If they don't do that, they're violating the ordinance. Number 2, they have to warn an individual to ask them to leave that storefront of that business first. What other law do you know on the books today that says that the officer has to warn you first? Third, if and when they refuse that help, they refuse the warning, they still insist on staying there, the officer then cites them with a ticket that does not come with a fine. It comes with a direction that sends them to community court. Unless they have an underlying warrant or they have other illegal activity they're engaged with on the scene, they're going to be directed 100% of the time to our community court, where we have this phenomenal coordination between the prosecutor, the public defender, and the judge that sits down and they create a customized set of solutions for that human being, back to the human being, that says, hey, Susie, by sitting down with you, we noticed that you don't have a place to live. You've told us you have an addiction. We understand you don't have your ID, right? Here's what we're going to do. You're going to go next door and you're going to get the help and the services you need. You're going to come back to me, the judge, next month, and if you're following that track, by the way, they're not telling them this, I'm sure, but they're going to give them multiple times, multiple chances, because if you're suffering from addiction, you're going to make mistakes. If you keep on that track and you keep working towards progress, guess what? We're going to tear up that ticket. There's no fine. There's no ticket. At the end of the day, what we're doing is we're taking our most challenged population, our folks that suffer from mental illness and from addiction, that don't know or refuse help, and we're helping to compel them, just like you do when your family member has an addiction. We're trying to intervene in their lives on their behalf in the most humanistic, holistic way and compel them to get help at community court and through the services that are there, one-stop shop at the community court. So I want to dispel that myth and just mention that that's a good example where our organization, the Downtown Spokane Partnership, is a partner in not only that role, but also many other roles. We really try to lead with our heart. We try to be a part of the solution. But at the end of the day, none of you in this audience and none of you at home that are trying to either work downtown, or run a business, or want to come down and enjoy a shop, or enjoy going to the skating ring without having to take your children through a ring of tents and needles and feces. That we too have rights. We too have a voice. And it's okay to say we should expect both. We can accomplish both. We focus on that human being. How do we holistically approach that human being, but not be afraid to compel them when they refuse help? And by doing that, we then help our downtown, and we help our community, and we help society. So if we approach this, I think, in that way, each one of us hopefully can find a way when they walk away tonight with something you might have heard, an opportunity for you to get engaged, a reason for you to be motivated, to step up and to visit with your council respectively, or to ask your state legislator for funding for substance abuse. Because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take every one of us. Instead of saying, this is somebody else's problem, this is downtown's problem, I'm asking our leaders out in Spokane Valley, you need to be a part of the solution. If we live in the valley, we need to be okay with citing housing facilities and treatment facilities throughout our entire region so that we aren't concentrating all of these efforts in our downtown. Because guess what? There'll be a breaking point. And that breaking point means many of these employers here today will go out of business, and the hundreds and thousands of employees that they employ will be out employed. And that means yours and my kids will be out looking for work. That's not an answer either. So join us in these solutions. I want to also just finish by saying we will take these and other suggestions, your comments, and we're going to move right into the mayor's task force. The mayor has granted us the permission to reignite that committee, and we're going to roll up our sleeves, and we're going to have a cross-section of stakeholders involved in driving forward and working day after day on these solutions, and we welcome you to be a vocal part of that effort. So I want to thank our panelists. If you would please give them a warm thank you for their wisdom and effort and courage. Sean, Mr. Owsley, I want to thank you for doing a fantastic job of moderating tonight. Please give Sean a hand. I want to thank your company, Q6, for airing this and for continuing this dialogue. I know Sean and I will be taking up this conversation in the morning to kind of recap. We'll welcome you to tune into Q6 for that. Sean's crew is going to replay this wherever they can find opportunities, and they'd love to interview some of our panelists on kind of a blog atmosphere so we can continue this very important, challenging, complex conversation. And again, we invite you into that process. And so I also want to thank our host tonight at the McGinnity Room. Thank you so much for what a beautiful facility. How gracious they were to provide the food and the room at a pittance of the cost that it cost them to put this program on. And lastly, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. Please don't walk away tonight. If you didn't get the answer you wanted, if you didn't hear the answer that you felt like was necessary, if you have an idea, check back to our website, check back to us, get involved, find a way to get involved, because that's the only way we're going to solve these challenging problems, or at least make headway on problems, frankly, that will, I'm sure, last our lifetime. So thank you so much. God bless, and have a beautiful evening. Thank you.